All right. Hello, welcome everyone who are joining us today. Thank you for coming to our SketchUp webinar on unlocking the power of SketchUp Studio. So we're really looking forward to demoing some of the features that are in this offering. So while people start to file in, I'll go ahead and introduce your two hosts for today, which we can do on the next slide. Oh, or we'll go over the. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. No, I mixed that up. That was me. That's on me. So, all right. So I am Stephanie David. I am the Indirect Global Marketing Manager at SketchUp. And Martin Cox is here, and he will be going through all of he's our customer success part manager for our resellers in EMEA. So he will be going over the different features, functionalities that are included in SketchUp Studio, which will increase your workflows. So, and then I guess we'll head back to the agenda, other direction. So we'll go over what's included in SketchUp Studio. I'm sure a lot of you probably already have a SketchUp Pro subscription. So, and you might not even know what SketchUp Studio offers. So we will go through that. We'll go through some specific workflows of SketchUp Studio and like how it's been applied to architecture, construction, interior design, and retail. What upgrade to SketchUp Studio would include, and then we are going to do our best to leave some buffer time at the end to answer your questions. So if you do have questions, please do put them in the Q&A box at the bottom, and then we will be answering those at the end. So we are, yeah, looking forward to having you with us, and I will hand it over to Martin.
Great. Thanks very much, Stephanie. As Stephanie mentioned, my name is Martin Cox, Customer Success Manager. So I've been around SketchUp for some time. I think I first started using SketchUp in about 2009. So, and I also started in construction around 30 years ago. So, I have been around the industry and around the features quite a long time. So also, I've had the opportunity to work with some of our SketchUp customers to really get to understand their workflows, how they really use SketchUp, how they get the most out of SketchUp. And it always amazes me that, how varied the uses are of SketchUp, how it's used in different industries. But of course, this webinar, we're going to sort of focus on SketchUp Studio and around the architecture, construction, and interior design. Now, as Stephanie mentioned, focusing on SketchUp Studio, and it comes with all the tools that SketchUp Pro comes with, and we still see people that don't realize, the amount of tools that they have available to them, even in their SketchUp Pro subscription. So, things like SketchUp for iPad, you have that available. Trimble Connect, so sort of their cloud storage project management tool, that's included in your SketchUp Pro license. The 3D warehouse tools, the SketchUp viewers and layout as well. But on the top of that, with SketchUp Studio, we get more sort of end-to-end tools that really allow us to quickly and efficiently create the tools, the sort of the work that we're looking for. And we're going to show you how, some people use these tools and sort of a little more of a deep dive into them. Now, there are 3 tools that come with SketchUp Studio that are additional to SketchUp Pro. And the first one is Revit Importer. And this means you can import a Revit model straight into your SketchUp model. It recognizes the tags. It will sort of create those tags that can be switched on and off. And, we'll have a look at that one as well. Scan Essentials, so working with scans and point clouds. Now, this could be relatively small point clouds for interior design. It could be really large point clouds for construction or landscaping. So, working with these point clouds really makes it very simple and easy. And it's sort of quite amazing how SketchUp works with these and opens up some of these options. And then we've also got V-Ray. So, V-Ray is sort of one of the top rendering solutions. It's considered one of sort of the highest quality sort of rendering solutions as well. So, how we can sort of work with that. And we're going to have a look at an example sort of with that around the interior design. But, all of these tools are used across really sort of all three of these markets that we're actually going to have a look at. But I want to start with SketchUp Studio in architecture. Now, SketchUp Studio in architecture, it's used in a significant amount of sort of the workflow that we have in architecture. So it really is about, working with the tools that we have. Just really, if you think of, mechanics, they have different tools for different jobs. We know that this is the case as well with sort of, architects, interior designers. SketchUp is a tool that, works alongside other tools sort of quite nicely, but helps really sort of improve the workflows, speed up workflows, and ultimately time saving. So for day to day, just thinking about how much sort of your time is worth. So really in architecture, right from the beginning, conceptualizing those design ideas, taking the idea for a work site and saying, okay, here's some concepts, here's some ideas to say, well, we'd like it to look like this. And then, you can have discussions like more glass, more, sort of bigger or smaller or shorter and colors. And it means that with the design ideas that you can quickly present in SketchUp, it gives those ideas very quickly. We can test those ideas. So we can actually look at the organization around models, testing how things could potentially fit together, different ideas that we've had there. Collaboration, really a huge part of SketchUp in any workflow, and in also any industry. This is really where SketchUp sits, that showing those sort of fast and flexible ideas and then communicating those designs. So creating clear visuals, whether it's in V-Ray, whether it's in sort of another renderer or just in SketchUp as well, because in SketchUp 2025 there's a sort of considerable amount of improvements around sort of the visualization there. But this is something that we do always work with. We don't position SketchUp to say you must only use SketchUp. We understand these workflows that are available to people. So this graphic can sometimes take a little bit of explaining, but this is sort of looking at a fairly typical workflow for an architect that uses Autodesk tools alongside SketchUp. And this is where we see, a number of sort of our customers working. And, we get that design brief, we create a conceptual model, we do some planning. And this is when sort of AutoCAD gets involved as well. So, we know there are 2D plans that sort of presented there. And then some of the design can sort of into SketchUp, developing that design with SketchUp and sort of AutoCAD, beginning to document it, AutoCAD and Revit, and then visualizing and presenting it sort of within SketchUp as well. But then there's also the other line. It can go round and round in circles of like a bit more design, bit more developing, and sort of creating those ideas. But then sort of into the final line, sort of setting up that approval process, detailed design documentation, which is going to be done in Revit potentially, or, another program if you're using that. But there are other aspects, again, where SketchUp gets involved with regarding sort of like the testing and visualizing, and also construction planning as well. So really, it is that positioning where we have SketchUp. Now, I'm going to show sort of this, it's a video here sort of looking at design coordination, looking at that collaboration within models. And this is using Trimble Connect. And Trimble Connect can contain your IFC models. It can contain Revit models. It will show you previews of those models as well. But then actually it allows you to store them, browse them, add notes, add workflows. And we can use Trimble Connect to then even combine these models and actually get them into SketchUp here. So this model that we have, DWG file there on the ground, but it's actually made up of the structural model there that we have. So, you know, we have that constructural model. This one particular structural model was done in Trimble Structures. We also have our MEP, so the mechanical, electrical, plumbing model as well. And you can see we're switching them on and off within our model. And these are all coming from Trimble Connect. And then we can really start looking at how we can combine that with SketchUp, really for the architecture side, the interior design side, the approval side, because we've now got our model, we've got the structure, and we can actually look at how this sort of comes in place. So within our MEP model, we have our sort of plumbing installations, electrical installations in the correct places. So we can actually see them. So we have, you know, our plant room there. We want to make sure that, you know, these are all going to be in the correct areas of our model. And even when it comes down to, you know, electrical sockets, light sockets, these will come into the model through the MEP and actually we'll be able to display in the correct place. So for our training suite that we have here, we can make sure that we're happy with the setup of the training suite, because we know SketchUp, it's so easy to bring in our models from perhaps 3D Warehouse and make sure the floor sockets are in the correct places for our setup that we envisage for our training suites. So really, you know, combining those tools very quickly, the collaboration that we mentioned, being able to say that, you know, we've got this all in one model, we can bring these together. So we have an architectural design for our reception here, but we've actually seen that the architectural design for the floating ceiling goes straight over the top of a air conditioning unit. So we need to make changes to that. Also, we can see that actually there's some steel work that's still exposed there. So we just, you know, we can quickly make a design change, make notes to that to say this needs boxing off, and those changes there. So when we've got, you know, those sort of settings there within our architectural model, again, we can communicate those and say that, you know, yep, we need this here for a TV that's going to be going on the wall. We can then start sort of saying, okay, well, let's now actually bring these visualizations in, and using sort of V-Ray, we can set the lights up in the scene here. So a lot of the lines that are coming out of those lights, they are lights within V-Ray. And we can set the materials around sort of the communication there, but it's even rendered those sort of fire sort of alarms and the sort of switches. So it's an actual representative model of exactly how we're going to see it. Fortunately, in this render, we have actually moved that air conditioning unit as well. So, you know, we were able to get that changed within MEP. So collaborating with the model there is a fantastic way of working really with sort of SketchUp Studio and through to those final renderings. Now, this can, of course, be outside as well. And within V-Ray, you can bring in models like people, trees, cars. There are internal models as well, which we're going to have a look at later. But using the real life models, using V-Ray to render, it then actually shows like that light feature on the wall there. It shows the plant on the roof, which often in rendering, that doesn't often get shown up. It actually shows the structural steel behind the glass, how we're going to see this as well. So, you know, using sort of all of our options there, in this instance around Trimble Connect, and if we use the Revit importer, if we had the steelwork model here, we can bring in all of those models straight away to create our sort of final rendering. So we can do, you know, a significant amount of that in Pro, but actually importing that the Revit model of the sort of the structural model, or if that's sort of Trimble Tekla structures as well, we can bring those in and then render that in V-Ray. And again, all of the examples in here, the trees and the cars, they're all V-Ray models that come in and we'll have a look at. So that's sort of one, kind of quick example around looking at sort of that architecture workflow. Very fast example there. There's a lot of information there, but hopefully, I know a number of you sort of architects. I know a number of you interior designers that I've seen. We've got a lot of other people on the call as well, and we're sort of going to have a look at as many options there as we can. But hopefully that starts to show that within that visualization and collaboration, we can move forward with that. Now, if we look at SketchUp Scan Essentials, now I mentioned about this, so using the point clouds. And what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to switch to SketchUp here. And this is SketchUp 2025, if it just looks a little bit different from maybe how your SketchUp looks, particularly with something like the material cubes, because there's been a lot of improvements around that. Now, using Scan Essentials within SketchUp, this gives us the ability to use industry standard point clouds. So there's any sort of point clouds. This one has come from a drone. We can see this is sort of quite a large point cloud. There's our SketchUp scale figure there. So it is, to the correct scale there. And this is, millions and millions of points. And if I sort of zoom in a little bit, we start to see all of the details is actually made up of points. And this is how it's displayed. And we have an entire menu within SketchUp for Scan Essentials. And I can bring that one down here just to show you, so it's nice and clear, the tools that you have. Just load in a scan point cloud. I can manage my point cloud just to make sure. I can unload it. I can choose how visual it is. So if it's 75% sort of transparent, I can sort of turn it off completely. I can choose if I want to snap to those points, set construction points and guidelines, and also sort of clip our point cloud, but also something like turn it into a solid as well. So I'm just going to sort of take that back up there. Because thinking about landscape architecture, point clouds in landscape architecture is, absolutely fantastic. It can save so much time. Now, we have our point cloud here, but what I'm going to do is if I select just sort of a quick area here, now making sure that I don't want to snap to my point cloud because I want to snap to my origin, I'm going to choose this particular area here. Now, this is the one I want to focus on. This is perhaps the area that we're going to do some landscaping work on. So I've got my face that I've created. It's underneath my point cloud, but I can select that. And then within my point cloud, I can actually sort of convert my point cloud into a ground mesh. Now, using the ground mesh, what we can do here is that I can select, I want a bounded one, which means that it's only going to be the face that I've actually selected. And if I create this mesh, it's going to do a little bit of calculating here. And we can see only took a few seconds, but now I've actually got this ground mesh here that is usable within SketchUp. Now, I mentioned about I can turn off the sort of the point cloud. If I turn that off, here's my surface. Now, this is a surface that I can now work with in SketchUp. And the great thing is I can also turn around and say, well, actually, I'd like to make this a solid. So this is taking that mesh and then making it a solid within SketchUp. So we now have that solid of that face using the point cloud. And this means that it opens up a lot of other tools, like some of the other solid tools that we can actually subtract. So, using kind of that cut and fill approach for landscaping, it sort of really opens that up for us. So, that's sort of just a quick example of the point cloud there, but I want to show how one of our customers has actually sort of been using the Revit importer, also Scan Essentials as well. And the customer that we mentioned here, so this is Chapman Taylor. So they are an architectural company, and they work globally, but they also do, you know, sort of they do interior design, they do landscape design, also, you know, residential mixed use and hospitality as well. So they are a big user of SketchUp, and particularly SketchUp Studio around the time that it's actually saved them. And some of the examples that we have here, so this was a project that they were working on. So they had used SketchUp initially to create models of this particular hotel complex, but then they'd worked in Revit, and then it actually went to the customer, and the customer said, instead of the towers being the same, we'd actually quite like to see what it would look like potentially with a different design on. So they use the Revit importer to import the Revit model into SketchUp. And when they use that in SketchUp, they can then visualize that and they can show that. So, you know, here they took the Revit model, imported it into SketchUp using the Revit importer, which took seconds. And then they were able to render that. And now these particular renders, they're using Enscape, and, you know, but just purely for speed. And they were actually able to create different design ideas for this particular project very quickly and easily, and then actually use it. And if you remember that workflow that we showed earlier, sort of being able to turn around and say, okay, this is how, you know, we can collaborate, we can communicate these ideas, because these models, and we can see that, you know, this image, this shows the final concept design, which Chapman Taylor actually won this design competition. So, you know, the project evolved into detailed design and delivery focused project, but the concept team, you know, then sort of they worked on the interior design concepts. But this really, you know, this shows collaboration between sort of 3 offices in the group around, you know, sort of being able to take the model very quickly. And, you know, they were talking away with sort of their old convention, you know, working in Revit and then sort of looking at locations, Revit importers. This took something that their workflow took them multiple hours, and it turned it into about a 10-minute process of getting the Revit model into SketchUp. So this one, you know, for sort of a relatively small cost, it was actually sort of saved them sort of many hours of work in this particular project. So, and, you know, they sort of took this rendering and, you know, in addition to the Revit importer, they then looked at the landscape design and sort of took the landscaping model as well. So, you know, they had the 2D information from the landscape consultants, and they were able to bring that in using sort of the AutoCAD drawings, and then they were able to place the trees, the plants, and sort of, again, render these within Enscape. Now, this is, you know, quite an impressive example of how they worked, but around their landscaping, they sort of other projects that they've actually had. So this one here, this is Arameris. This is actually an island development project. And this one, sort of working with this, they were able to use SketchUp, you know, Revit importer, again, around some of the models like the hotel complex, that sort of by the pool, the actual resort complex here, and some of the buildings. But within SketchUp, they were able to use sort of the terrain modeling tools, some of the point cloud information, and also, you know, bringing in sort of that add location to be able to set this up in a model of quite a considerable size, because what was quite important in this particular project were the views from the island. They needed to see, what other islands you could see, what other views that you had. So, this particular one was using sort of like a cut and fill approach around the development of the island, and then sort of cutting in. And then the final rendering, this was done again in Enscape. So let me just mute that sound there. He says, there we go, that's got that. So this was something that actually wouldn't have been physically possible within Revit. Having that resort model in Revit, you certainly couldn't bring in and say, well, we'd actually like sort of the island topography, being able to, set that up, have a look at those views, and exactly how the landscaping and the design of this particular island looks. And that's what I was saying about like sun positions and how it looks with the other island that's opposite. So, this was something that the rendering and all of these models were able to be created in relatively quick time, even sort of just a couple of weeks, to be able to bring in, the trees and utilizing sort of extensions and modeling within sort of that SketchUp Revit importer as well. So, it really does show the capabilities around SketchUp in this, around the landscape design. This is an entire island project here that shows the ability to show how the landscape is going to be designed, how the resort is going to fit in, how the views are going to look, from that particular infinity pool there. And, using sort of the cut and fill approach for landscaping, being able to really set that up. And the thing is about this as well is, if you think of this project, in an old school project, these would be 2D drawings laid on a table. There would be a number of 3D models perhaps, but actually to be able to show this, this particular video was shown to sort of the royal family regarding sort of around that country, and they can understand it, they can see it, and it's like, yeah, I get it. I can see exactly how this is going to work. We can see our amphitheater. We know it's, this is going to be that social place, and exactly how it's going to sit in to sort of that exact island with all the others. So, it really is about sort of utilizing the power of the different tools. So, this example from Chapman Taylor really does show how, they believe that SketchUp, and particularly SketchUp Studio, is an essential part of their workflow, because it has saved them so much time within their sort of processes and workflow there. Now, what we're going to look at now, so, moving on to sort of SketchUp Studio in construction. So thinking about, we've got sort of those elements around the architects, and we also understand that a lot of architects are actually, sort of working in project management as well around the construction. We understand that, and so we look at SketchUp in construction along that as well. So SketchUp construction, again, there's sort of a similar message there within sort of our architecture. Really, it's in multiple options around SketchUp in construction. So, conceptualizing the build processes, site layouts, actually sort of setting that up at the beginning and saying, well, some sites have limited space, and we actually have one sort of quite large construction company in the UK, and they use SketchUp to show, okay, this is where generators are going to be, this is where the porter cabins are going to be, this is where the portaloos are going to be there, because people want to know this and understand if they're going to lose parking spaces and things like that. But there's also, being able to say, okay, showing model organization to sort of specify that, how the loading areas are going to be set up. Does this work with regards to the crane positionings? With the crane loading areas, the crane sort of safety areas, and the loading circle there. and then communicating these processes, coordinating and planning with the site sort of managers. A huge cost within construction is generally unused materials or unused machinery that arrives at the wrong time. So using the planning, and we'll show some examples of this, of being able to say, okay, you know, week 1 to week 2, this is the area that's going to be available. This is where we're going to store the materials. This is, you know, where we're having a look, sort of being able to set that sort of safety area up there. And, you know, these are just some of the construction companies around the world, you know, but we have, you know, also sort of single users using SketchUp, of course, single architects, because, you know, they get involved in often a lot sort of more of that part. But, you know, so yeah, small to large really shows where, you know, SketchUp can fit in here as well. So I want to have a look at a construction example here, and I'm going to go back to sort of my SketchUp 2025, and we'll have a look at a construction model here. Now, this particular model, this is coming from a Revit import. And what I was saying earlier about when you import a Revit model, it creates those tags in SketchUp, so we can actually see the Revit model there. Recognizes the different sort of metadata of the Revit file, so it knows the walls, it knows sort of the roof and the plants and your floors and doors as well. But utilizing this Revit model, we can actually almost sort of reverse engineer this and actually have a look sort of to say, well, okay, let's set up this site here. So, you know, right from the beginning, if we say, well, these are going to be sort of our markers where things are going to be fenced off, and then actually starting that construction, let's put the crane up, let's take our sort of our building there, and then we can really sort of look at these loading zones to making sure sort of we're happy with that. So, you know, our vehicle access that we're going to have with the site, the site offices that we're going to set up. This is what we were talking about earlier about how, you know, our site is going to be set up. But we can take this further. So we can actually look at the excavations that are going to take place using the 3D warehouse. And we can see actually, you know, our site land here came from a point cloud in Scan Essentials as well. So Scan Essentials, Revit import for our building. And then using our sort of tools here to say, okay, we've got some deliveries coming. Let's look at laying the rebar there. And we've just used some sort of section plane sort of movements and actually setting up to show that, okay, so we've got, you know, these sort of formwork delivery happening on these dates here. And, you know, using these as watermarks. And there's a number of sort of stages that we can add, and we can start talking about like the formwork, you know, the scaffolding that we're going to put up. And we're using our Revit import here. Now we've turned everything else off within our sort of Revit model here to say, okay, so I only want to show the walls, the topography, and some of the roofs there. And we can then have a look at that, you know, going through our sort of scenes and creating that animation within SketchUp of saying, okay, you know, this is our site plan. These are the signage that we need. And again, this is a really popular use of SketchUp, of actually showing where signage needs to go, where particular sort of health and safety equipment is going to be needed as we go through. And again, turning things on and off of our Revit model, we can really sort of control that. So it's like, okay, we can specify the health and safety that's going to be worked on our sort of plant cage here. And then the drawings for the plant cages, you know, we can bring those through and get those sort of 2D drawings. But then we have our visual model at the end here. There we go. Now, this isn't rendered using anything. This is using the new visualization tools within SketchUp 2025. So this isn't actually a render. This this is how we now model with the environments that we have. So, you know, if I have a look in my environments here, we've got that sky sunset, and I can sort of select different environments here, and actually it gives it a completely different feel, sort of for the model as we come in. I can turn that background on and off if we need that within our environment. Excuse me. So if I turn off using sky environment, the sky dome, then we don't have that. We can sort of have our different visualizations in the back, but we still get the reflections around the materials that we see on those. But it again just shows really sort of that the power of sort of those settings there. Okay. Now, I have seen it's been mentioned a couple of times coming in about the recording of the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, and it will be available and distributed at the end. So yeah, even if you're sort of attending, the recording will be available to you. Okay. So that's sort of within our in our construction environment. Now, if you think about it, that we created all those scenes, and then within those scenes you can create an animation. So just using a little bit of a, you know, sort of video editing here, actually putting our sort of our construction plan over the top of a video using scenes within SketchUp. How cool is that to be able to show this type of animation? Again, instead of a drawing saying this is what's happening week 1, this is what's happening week 2, it's like to show this animation and to be able to say this is how we see the process going from start to finish. That communication, that collaboration really sort of leads into that. And, you know, again, we know that sort of the architecture and construction work sort of hand in hand there as well. And another one of our customers that, you know, they have actually sort of used this particular functionality. So this is Strabag, and you know they use SketchUp really communicating their site layouts, key logistic points, crane reach, storage areas, and actually, you know, they've taken it further to show like how the ground is made up, because this is actually a tunnel that's going sort of under a river there. So, you know, they can really sort of portray that. And they've actually also, you know, created a video in the way that we were talking, using the different scenes to actually sort of break this down, show the construction area and those particular reach zones of the cranes. They've labeled all of those, the storage compound, the material compound, the parking, and all of those units during the construction phase of the project. So they really created like this, you know, 3D prototype of the site to be able to say, yep, we can get this access, we've got this controlled, we know where loading is going to take place, and we know where things are going to be. And, you know, again, using sort of the add location, they can really set that up as well within that communication for, you know, actually creating this tunnel. So quite a, you know, an amazing sort of project that they've worked on here, you know, and being able to communicate all of that to everybody on site. And again, something that, you know, we always, or we don't always think of, is a 3D model doesn't usually get sort of misinterpreted. It's fairly easy to see a 3D model and be able to say, this is how it's looking, and these are the things that we need to consider. So, you know, it opens things up for a lot more people within that communication. Okay. So we've now looked, you know, we've had our architecture, we've had our site, and now looking at SketchUp Studio in interior design and retail. And think about this working in slightly a different way. So point clouds. Now, point clouds are fantastic in sort of like some of these smaller spaces for 3D design as well. Now, this is using a LiDAR scanner on an iPad in this particular example. And this is being used to scan this apartment. And this is a real life project that was actually worked on as well. And, you know, I'll show the results of this as we go through. But we do also have a feature called Scan to Design, which is on the iPad, but it very much depends upon the space that you have. So this particular space, it was quite an interesting shaped apartment. So Scan to Design, it wasn't as ideal with some of the angles that we had on the roof, whereas the point cloud, we could actually import the point cloud into SketchUp and work with that point cloud. Now, the great thing is about once this is in SketchUp is that you can use that point cloud to measure. And being able to use this point cloud to measure also means that it's like, if I didn't measure one thing while I was on site, you haven't got to go back on site. You can actually pick this up on the point cloud there as well, you know, using the scan from iPad, iPhone. Or, you know, if it's a larger space, I would recommend using sort of a more professional scanner and LiDAR scanner for those spaces. But also using the 3D space here, it then also makes it easier, you know, you can actually utilize those points to model as well. So you can pick up on those points. Now, I did see a question come in regarding sort of, you know, using the convert to a surface of a point cloud to say it's like an interior space. It doesn't really work for that. That's looking more to creating a ground plane. But, you know, by scanning that interior space, it does mean you can pick up on those a lot quicker with regards to measuring. And this is the actual project that was worked on. And this was worked on with an interior design company. It was actually sort of utilized within a magazine as well to show sort of the design and, you know, creating these spaces, but sort of fully working within SketchUp as well. So, you know, scanning the space, and we'll go into the SketchUp model, and you know, I'll be able to show you some of what I mean by some of those angles there. So within our space, we have it sort of scanned within our point cloud, modeled within SketchUp, and then set up to render within V-Ray. So I'm now going to open up the model of this particular loft space. And if I have a look around here, what I'll do, I'll have a look at the floor plan, which shows that it's far from a nice straight edged space. Within sort of our external view as well, you can see that the shape of the roof there, again, there's some quite interesting angles, which is great, you know, to be able to set up really sort of within SketchUp. And then within our views here, you know, we can actually bring those in. And what the customer really liked here is one that we were able to show them the model. We were able to set up different versions of the model. So within their kitchen, we could have 3 different versions of kitchens, turn one off, turn one on, different sort of options within there. And then rendering within V-Ray. So directly inside SketchUp, what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn on the interactive renderer here. Now, the interactive rendering window, the results will vary, one, depending on your computer, but also depending on the space as well that you have, the size of the space. And it, you know, it takes a little bit of processing. This isn't too bad. I'm far from using, you know, like a high-end games PC here. This is actually on a laptop that's a couple of years old. So, you know, it's not extremely sort of high spec. But the great thing is, by setting that up in V-Ray, you can really gauge then the feel of that model for the customer. So, you know, if we wanted to have a look at this wall here that we've currently got sort of in the cream color, if I just within my material selector, now this is a lot easier when you're using 2 screens, but in my material selector, if I paint that wall red, the render updates straight away, and that room gets a completely different feel to it. And, you know, the light gets, you know, a sort of a red warmth to it picked up in the room, you know, where the sun's coming in from there. And we can, you know, have a look at those different options to say, well, actually, what would it be like in sort of a, you know, a fairly sort of pale blue there. And again, you see completely different feel even before it's rendered, sort of different feel to that space. So it is really useful to be able to do that. And it doesn't just have to be around our colors, sorry. So our materials within SketchUp, they are, you know, set up to render within V-Ray. So if I choose sort of like a gold color or gold material, and I paint my wall that gold material, suddenly we've now actually got a semi-reflective gold wall, which is not perhaps to a lot of people's taste, but you know, the option is there. And it does actually sort of really depend on where we say. So if I want to sort of look from the other end of the room, so, you know, V-Ray is just sort of catching up with us there. And we can then see that, you know, from the other end of the room, we've got a lot of light coming in, which makes the rest of the room a little bit darker there. But the great thing is about that is that I can go into my settings within V-Ray here. And if I have a look at my sort of camera, I've got automatic exposure turned on. But if I turn off the automatic exposure, I can set that to say, well, actually, I'd like it to be a little bit brighter. That's a lot brighter. But I can control the exposure in that room, which means, yes, the bright sun that's coming in through the window is sort of quite exposed, but then it brightens up the room there as well. And these renders can then be exported as required. Yeah, that's definitely overexposed. But let's just turn that down just a little bit. I've probably gone too far. That's the fun part of doing this live. I'm just clicking as opposed to thinking about actual numbers. Let's turn that to, let's do 12.5. I can't remember what the number actually was, but this is generally how you should work instead of just keep clicking on the slider to see what actually happens. It's 15. That's fine. I'm not going to spend too long doing that. Oh, I'm going the wrong way, aren't I? 11. There we are. There. Now, the one thing, you know, V-Ray does have a lot of settings. It can be a little bit daunting to start with. But what I would say is that actually it's not too bad, you know, when you start getting used to it. There's lots of videos on YouTube. We have some training within the sort of SketchUp free training as well for V-Ray. But it can give great results sort of as you work through. So if I go back to our view from sort of the other end of the room here, and if we want something on the table, so I'm just still inside that wall at the moment. So let me just come out of that. There we go, in SketchUp. And it doesn't have to be. So I'd like something on the table, perhaps like a magazine. The great thing about V-Ray is it also comes with Chaos Cosmos. And Chaos Cosmos, it's opened up on my other screen. Let me bring that across. There we go. It comes with all of these models that are basically ready to render. And if I search, I'm going to search for a magazine here. And there's some books or magazines, and it's like, oh, great. Okay, we want it to look like somebody is reading currently, so I can import that directly into my model. We'll put that book on the table. And that's placed that directly in the rendering window. So I'll just close that down. If I zoom into my table, spin around there, and we can actually see that it's a simple proxy model that's in the SketchUp window, but it actually shows as a sort of magazine in our window there. Okay. Now, this is also the same concept, you know, sort of being able to use in sort of shop design and shop fitting as well. So if I just go back to my slides here, and, you know, we can see that the models at the back, if you look at the trees through the window, you'll see them as almost like sort of cotton candy type of approach, but these are the proxy models and the people are the same. so they come in as well. Okay. So I've realized I've come to about time, so I'm going to pass back to Stephanie just to sort of finish up around value, and then we could do some questions. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Martin. All right, so before we dive into the Q&A, I just want to talk a little bit about the value of SketchUp Studio. So while you've been watching this, there's a couple of questions that I want to have you ask yourself of, how do you currently visualize your designs in 3D? How are you convincing your clients of your ideas? How are you able to currently test your design options? And how are you able to focus your clients on what's really important on those early designs? How long is this taking you? And what is your hourly rate? So how much is this actually costing you to do today without SketchUp Studio? So I mean, the value here is you are getting quicker sign off from your clients with these workflows and features that Martin has shown you. You have the ability to win more projects. And then you're increasing the quality of your work while reducing confusion with the communications of your client. So on the next slide, if you already have SketchUp Pro, you have SketchUp for Webs included. You already have 3D Warehouse. Trimble Connect is included. SketchUp for iPad, SketchUp Pro Layout, Extension Warehouse, Pre-Design, and SketchUp AR and VR viewers are already included. And this is included as well in SketchUp Studio, except you get the Revit Importer, Scan Essentials, and V-Ray, which we demonstrated. So upgrading, it is an extra $400 or 385 euros per year. So if you actually calculate this on the time savings of your hourly rate over the year, we find that the payback that most of our clients, our professional clients have is pretty quick with just the time savings that you get. And then on the next slide, if you already have Pro and you upgrade, we are able to prorate your subscription for the remainder of the time that you have. So please do reach out to your SketchUp local reseller to learn more. And again, we did get some questions of is this recording going to be shared out? So we will make sure that this information is shared with you through your local reseller. All right, so that I think brings us to our Q&A. So we do have a couple of minutes. So let me go through some of the questions that haven't been quite answered yet. Martin, regarding the get location functionality, we have a participant who is working with open data referencing the Swiss system, but the function doesn't allow to choose the coordinate system and have the data at the right place. Is there a way to choose the coordinate system?
With regards to choose the coordinate system, unfortunately not. There are different plugins that allow sort of modification around sort of the geolocation ultimately. So having a look at some of those plugins can help with that and around that positioning. But yeah, it is something we do see. Yeah, I'd say have a look at that. If you still have problems, you can sort of ask your reseller. They generally can come to us as well. Yeah, that's it. It can be a bit of a tricky one, but there again, like I said, there are extensions that can do it.
Okay, we have another question. All this PBR materials can it be used with other rendering programs?
Some of the PBR materials can, generally with rendering software. A lot of the PBR materials are compatible because PBR is a pretty much industry standard on that. So once you've created your PBR materials or using your PBR materials in SketchUp, you can then import them into sort of different renderings. So, I know at the moment, because it literally has just come out with SketchUp 2025, that some of the renderers don't work with some of the PBR materials. But I know V-Ray, it's sort of probably a lot closer on those ones. But it's definitely coming, and anyone that you manually create, you can generally import. So
Great, thank you. We do have about 4 more minutes, so if you do have other questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So we'll make sure to use up all the time that we have. We have another question. For animations, do you have advice on plugins besides Keyframe and Fredo Animator?
it really depends on the type of animations that you want to use. So, if you want like cars moving, people sort of walking, then, keyframe's a good option. Section animator, if you're looking at sort of creating like some of those effects that we had, so you can sort of have things fading in as sort of section cuts go through. But SimLab Composer, if looking at almost like construction processes. It's a tough question on that one, because depending on the type of animation, but there's some examples there. So.
All right, we have more of a comment than a question from one of our resellers that is joining us. Just going back to the Chapman Taylor example that you gave of that, it was a render that was created from both SketchUp Studio and Enscape. They did want to make clear that Enscape is not part of the SketchUp Studio offering, but I don't know, Martin, if you want to talk a little bit more of like the synergy between different tools that SketchUp Studio integrates with.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's my bad on that one. I should have sort of made that very clear. But yeah, Enscape is actually owned by the same people as V-Ray. So if you do rendering in Enscape, V-Ray will recognize those materials, and you can usually take them to sort of the next level there as well. There's a number of other sort of rendering options as well, and this is something that really sort of that we kind of sort of talk about. But yeah, within SketchUp Studio, and I hope this is what I was trying to show, that actually using different parts of it, really sort of focus. So the Chapman Taylor workflow, yeah, they don't generally get involved in V-Ray because they're doing quite the large sort of renders there of kind of that architecture and landscape architecture. But number of other rendering software like D5, and there's some great options out there. So.
All right. Let's see what other questions. I think we already talked about using the Scan Essentials feature for buildings to create solid groups. I think you covered that one already. Let's see if there's anything.
There was one question that came in fairly last minute regarding upgrading.
How can I upgrade current V-Ray license to Studio, which includes V-Ray as well? For this, we can direct you to your local reseller to upgrade your subscription to Studio. So. All right. I think we're pretty much at time, unless there's any questions that want to come in at the last 30 seconds. Otherwise, again, we'll make sure that you guys get the recording. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, thank you, Martin, for the demo, the information, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Bye.